Hi everyone, and thank you for being here. And today is our last Sunday in the series of the field, that field of non-duality, of oneness. And today I want to talk about our bodies and how we experience non-duality and can cultivate that within our own bodies. And amazingly, our brains and our bodies have evolved to both occupy the world of up, down, right, left, separation, so that we can function as earth-based beings, and at the very same time occupy the vast life force power of the universe, where there is no separation or difference between my body and the air in this room. I think we have a graph. There, we have a graphic. Our brains and the brains of all mammals have two hemispheres that are separated from one another and control opposite sides of our motor system in our bodies. Our brains process the huge streams of information, energy that come into it every second of every moment of our lives. And these two sides process that information differently. The right half takes information and experiences, and it experiences the present moment. It feels, sees, smells, senses everything as the present moment, right now. No past, no future, just now. It experiences itself as one with all that is. The left hemisphere experiences the created reality of space-time. It's linear and methodical. It organizes the information that it receives. It's all about the past and the future. It thinks in language. It says, I am. And as an I am, it's separate from everything else. One of the most dramatic examples of this is from a book called My Stroke of Insight by Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. I don't know if anyone here has ever read that or seen her TED Talks, but it's very interesting. And Dr. Taylor is a neurobiologist who suffered a stroke on the left side of her brain in 1996. And she experienced what it was like to have only the right hemisphere of her brain operating for a period of time. During the first minutes of her stroke, she began to observe the concrete reality around her, as well as her body start to dissolve into atoms and molecules. And she was overwhelmed by the peace, beauty, and loving power of this experience. So we're going to do a little clip, about a 4-minute clip, from Dr. Taylor's TED Talk in 2008, where she's describing this experience.
On the morning of the stroke, I woke up to a pounding pain behind my left eye. And it was the kind of pain, caustic pain, that you get when you bite into ice cream. And it just gripped me, and then it released me. And then it just gripped me, and then it released me. And it was very unusual for me to ever experience any kind of pain, so I thought, okay, I'll just start my normal routine. So I got up and I jumped onto my cardio glider, which is a full body, full exercise machine. And I'm jamming away on this thing, and I'm realizing that my hands look like primitive claws grasping onto the bar. And I thought, that's very peculiar, and I looked down at my body, and I thought, whoa, I am a weird-looking thing. And it was as though my consciousness had shifted away from my normal perception of reality, where I'm the person on the machine having the experience, to some esoteric space where I'm witnessing myself having this experience. And it was all very peculiar, and my headache was just getting worse, so I get off the machine, and I'm walking across my living room floor, and I realize that everything inside of my body has slowed way down. And every step is very rigid and very deliberate. There's no fluidity to my pace, and there's this constriction in my area of perception, so I'm just focused on internal systems. And I'm standing in my bathroom getting ready to step into the shower, and I could actually hear the dialogue inside of my body. I heard a little voice saying, okay, you muscles, you got to contract, and you muscles, you relax. And then I lost my balance, and I'm propped up against the wall. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. And then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online, and it says to me, hey, we got a problem, we got to get some help. And I'm going, oh, I got a problem. So it's like, okay, I got a problem. But then I immediately drifted right back out into the consciousness, and I affectionately refer to this space as La La Land. But it was beautiful there. Imagine what it would be like to be totally disconnected from your brain chatter that connects you to the external world. So here I am in this space, and my job and any stress related to my job, it was gone. And I felt lighter in my body. And imagine all of the relationships in the external world and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria.
Yeah, it's quite a wow. Now, Dr. Taylor was very fortunate to survive, but this was an experience that she would never have wanted. It was a very dangerous experience for her. But it turned out to be a peak experience in her life, and it changed the trajectory of her life and her career. And so just stop for a second and think, have you had an experience? None of us, I don't think, have had one quite as dramatic as that. But an experience where something happened, maybe an accident or an illness or a loss that you would never have wanted to, you would have asked for it. But it resulted in a shift in your perception, a positive spiritual growth for you, perhaps. And you know, we've all probably had something like that happen, since growth is rarely an easy journey. But maybe keep that in mind, and we'll revisit that later on. So Dr. Taylor experienced what we would call nirvana, or a self-transcendent experience, when the left side of her brain was offline. But obviously, we can't survive that way. So what are some ways that we can cultivate that sense of oneness and peace within ourselves? Well, this next picture that's coming up, you may recognize. This is Richard Alpert, better known as Ram Dass. And Ram Dass was in the forefront of the psychedelic movement in the 1960s, along with Timothy Leary. And they were experimenting with LSD as a route to higher consciousness, to achieve the experience of non-duality. But he went to India in 1967 and met his guru, who introduced him to meditation as an alternative to drugs. And he became a very famous proponent and practitioner of the Eastern style of meditation that we are all familiar with for the rest of his life. And what did Ram Dass say again and again and again? And what was the title of his first book? Does anybody know?
How can I help? Be here now.
Be here now. Right. Or that. Be here now. Very simple, very powerful. So simply practicing being present is a powerful practice in and of itself. And the key to being present is to release any story or judgment. You want to observe, feel, listen to sounds. When the mind chatter starts, just go back to listening. No story, no judgment. Formal meditation is another way we can learn to quiet the left hemisphere's chatter and allow the right brain to simply experience what is. There are many different types of meditation practices, not just the Eastern style popularized by people like Ram Dass. In the Christian tradition, there is something called centering prayer. And it's a very deep contemplative practice. Has anyone ever done centering prayer? As a couple people, yes, me too. It's very similar, but it has its own flavor, so to speak. But if meditation and prayer practices don't suit you, because they can be challenging, there are many other tools we can use. For time immemorial, humans have used ritual practices as a way to enter into an altered state of consciousness. But what does that mean? What makes something a ritual? Ritual is defined as a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. Think of the ritual of saying grace before a meal. I know when I was growing up, we said the same prayer every day before dinner. Taking communion is another practice, is another one, for instance. But you can turn anything in your life, any everyday task or chore, into a ritual by being present to it and creating an atmosphere or an attitude of the sacred. Now, my husband, Dan, that you know, has his morning ritual, and it's making coffee. He gets up first, and he goes through a series of repetitive actions that are the same every morning for making coffee. And he's still sleepy, so his brain chatter hasn't really kicked in. So it's the smells, the sights, the sounds of the ritual of making coffee. And it's the same every day. And it's an important thing for him. It may not be solemn. I don't think it's very solemn. But it's very pleasurable, and he's very present to that ritual. So I would encourage you to experiment in your own life. What are some everyday tasks that you go through? Same series, that you go through, and how can you make that into a ritual for yourself that's pleasurable? And all you need to do is be present to it and pay attention. It can be turned into a sacred ritual. So if anybody has any ideas, I just encourage you to call them out, something that you can do that would...
Making your bed.
Making your bed, yes. Eating, absolutely. Boy, if we did more mindful eating, that would be... Walking, yes. Feeding the animals. Yoga, yes. Exercise. Gardening, yeah.
Going out for my paper in the morning.
Yes, going out for your paper in the morning. Taking a bath. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So all of these things that you can do, because a lot of them we simply do unconsciously and automatically, and we're not thinking about it, we just do it. But when you become present to it, it changes the whole experience. And I've had quite a bit of experience practicing different rituals because I'm from California. Yes. And about 15 years ago, I was part of a group of people who studied ritual practices, mainly from West Africa. And we met monthly to do things like grief rituals, gratitude rituals, and other healing rituals. We used drumming, singing, writing. And those experiences really helped to open a window for me of a different way of perceiving the world. One Sunday I was on a hike, Dan and I were on a hike after our gathering the day before, where we had done hours of drumming and healing rituals for two of our members who had had an auto accident. One of the rituals involved vulture feathers as a way to symbolically cleanse away trauma. And I decided that I wanted to find a vulture feather for myself. We were on a hike, we were out in nature. But as soon as I said out loud I wanted to find a vulture feather, a voice in my head said, "No, you don't get that. You have reviled the vulture community for so long, you do not get a feather." Again, I'm a California girl, so talking to the vultures is no big deal. Right? And I'm with my husband, so as I'm talking to the vultures, he's thinking, who can I call? Do I have any cell service for 911? I don't know. But I took that message at face value and really looked for a feather the whole rest of our hike and never found one. So I decided a week later to do a ritual of amends to the vultures. And I went to Whole Foods and got organic turkey parts, mind you. We went up on a ridge, we hiked up on a ridge, I went out, I built a medicine wheel, I put the turkey parts in the wheel, and I did my prayers. I did prayers of apology and I did prayers of gratitude. Meanwhile, Dan was trying to get cell service, I think. But as I walked back to rejoin him on the trail, after that ritual, I felt light, I felt expansive, I felt connected. And doing that ritual, as silly as it may sound, and I totally get that, as silly as that ritual helped me to feel connected to everything that was there. The earth, the sky, the trees, myself, my husband, everything. Now, my left brain had kept up its chatter and critique, but I was more focused on the experience, so I could let that kind of go and simply be with that experience. And on our way down the mountain, on the trail, what do I see sticking straight up out of the trail but a vulture feather? So I picked it up, said thank you, and went on my way. That was important to me. What really happened there? Well, I don't know. On the one hand, I can say, the vultures gifted me a feather. On the other hand, you could say, come on, there's 100 vultures circling overhead. What's the likelihood of one of them dropping a feather? Pretty high. But it doesn't matter. I don't have to understand that experience to have value. I know how it felt. I know what it meant to me. And that's the only thing that's important. And so Jake mentioned this earlier, and I just wanted to point out that a lot of times we have experiences that we can't really logically explain why it happened. But we know it felt important. It was important. It meant something to us. And that's the only thing that matters. So we'll later on maybe talk a little bit about that. If any of you have had an experience in your life that you couldn't really explain logically, but it was important, it meant something, it was transformational. So Dr. Taylor and many, many other gurus over time have described that state of non-duality: expansive, loving, beautiful, connected. that field beyond right doing and wrong doing. And there are many ways for us to access this. But there's no one way, there's no one right way. Experiment in your own life, doing what you enjoy. Be open, let go of judgment, and try not to make it about something. Let go of the story. Another powerful way to use, a tool to use, is music. We just listen to beautiful music. We do that all the time, hopefully, in our lives. And certain types of sound seem to affect us more powerfully than others because of a unique aspect of our nervous system. We have a major nerve system called the vagus nerve, and that runs from the brain through the digestive system. It is connected to our vocal cords, the muscles at the back of the throat, and it passes through the inner ear. It helps to regulate stress responses in the body and is stimulated by breathing, humming, and singing. So if you will indulge me, we want to take a minute and do a little practice. We're going to hum. And when you're humming, pay attention to the sensations that produces in your mouth, your tongue, your throat, your nose. So we hum with the mouth closed, and we'll just do a couple of hums. Okay? So deep breath. It tickles. Okay, deep breath. So did you feel how there's all kinds of vibrations? It vibrates in the mouth, it vibrates the tongue, even the teeth. And there are certain ranges of sound that stimulate the vagus nerve that create feelings of peace and calm, most typically low sounds. Think of the repetitive sound om, which really we just made in our hum, the om sound, and the drone sounds of certain instruments. The didgeridoo is an ancient instrument created by the Aboriginal people of Australia at least 55,000 years ago. And it produces high-frequency gamma activity in the range of 50 to 150 hertz. Not that I know what that means, but it sounds good. And this the brain finds soothing and meditative. So let's listen to a little clip of didgeridoo music, and if you can, close your eyes and just see what that feels like in the body. So that might have made you want to get up and dance and move around, because music also stimulates our motor system. In medieval Europe during the 9th and 10th century, there developed a form of sacred chant that is today still beloved for its beauty, and that is Gregorian Chant. And it vibrates at a higher frequency, 432 hertz, which is also very calming. So very different from the didgeridoo, let's listen to some Gregorian chant. And again, close your eyes and see how that feels. If any of you were raised Catholic, it probably took you right back to High Mass. Very beautiful. But you know, any kind of music that you enjoy is going to stimulate many areas of the brain and release brain chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, the feel-good, the happy, the loving hormones. And not surprisingly, as I said, music stimulates our motor responses as well. I would imagine that you've experienced a song or a piece of music that immediately pulled you out of the critical mind and into the feeling mind. And as you may suspect, music stimulates a lot of activity in the right hemisphere of the brain. Here's an interesting finding from the National Institutes of Health. A highly significant finding to emerge from the studies of the effects in the brain of listening to music is the emphasis on the importance of the right hemisphere. And studies using brain imaging have shown that the right hemisphere is preferentially activated when listening to music in relation to the emotional experience, and that even imagining music activates areas on this side of the brain. So chanting, singing, yogic movements, I didn't really touch on things like yoga, but yoga and Tai Chi, which are it's a ritualized, it can be ritual set of movements, repetitive movements that you use the body, is using the body as a meditative tool. So dance and body movement is another way. We're all familiar with Jalaluddin Rumi as a 13th century Sufi poet. But he also started what we now call whirling dervish dancing as a form of meditation. As he told his followers, there are many roads which lead to God, and the specific type of whirling allows the dancer's consciousness to remain a quiet, still center as the body rotates. Even watching them is very, very almost mesmerizing. In today's world, we do things called ecstatic dance, which really serve as another form of meditation. So why do we care about all these practices? Why do we care about what we call seeking God? Why do we long to find the field, a place of non-judgment, expansion, and love? Well, I believe it's because that state of being, of pure loving consciousness, is the truth of who we are as spiritual beings. And we carry that consciousness within us in these earth bodies in order to guide us. Our brains are attuned to this truth, even as we may fight against it with our egos and fears. Imagine what kind of world we could create if just for a moment everyone got a glimpse of non-duality. Everyone watched the physical infrastructure dissolve into swirling atoms in perfect loving awareness, just for a second. Maybe we'd recognize that this physical world is created and impermanent, and all of our fighting and all of our angers and all of our wars are nothing. And the only truth is the loving awareness of the one. The calmer and more peaceful we can be, using tools like music, meditation, dance, ritual, just being present. The more we allow our right hemisphere to experience this present moment, which will lead us to the oneness that appears to be our ultimate and true reality. Yes, we need our bodies and our left hemisphere in order to function as human beings on this planet. But what Dr. Taylor's experience and others have demonstrated is that when freed of that necessity, and eventually we will all be freed of that necessity, we join with the perfect oneness of the universe, with God. As Dr. Taylor says, we are the life force power of the universe. We can choose at any time to run the deep, peaceful circuitry of the right hemisphere of our brains. So as we close this series, we know that non-duality is not an abstract concept. It's a real, available experience that we can all cultivate. Experiment and find what works for you. Find your favorite ways to engage the right hemisphere of your brain. So thank you, and as we close, as always, this will be the close of our service. And if you would like to leave, please, just go out in the lobby, whatever you want to do. But if you would like to stay and meet with your friends, here are a couple of questions that you can think about. Some ways that you would like to engage the right hemisphere. And do you have a treasured experience that defies left brain logic? So thank you very much.